The chain of life starts right here with green plants. The chlorophyll that gives them their green color also makes it possible for them to make their own food. Some green plants, the various types we call algae, have rather simple structures. No roots, stems, nor leaves. But they do have chlorophyll, and that's usually enough to classify an organism as a plant. But classification is not always that simple. A mushroom is one of several types of fungi, sometimes classified as plants. And a fungus is like a plant in many ways, but it has no chlorophyll, so it must get its food from other living things. That's why some scientists feel that fungi should be classified separately from plants as well as from animals. There are thousands of species of fungi, and many of these species are very small organisms that can be seen only under a microscope. But with these microscopic organisms, there's another problem of classification. Bacteria are single-celled organisms often classified with the fungi. And yet, there's an important difference. The genetic material, or DNA, in a bacterium is not organized into a true nucleus, as it is in most living cells. For that reason, many scientists feel that bacteria should be classified as part of another special group. Bacteria are among the smallest of all living things. There may be thousands of them in a single drop of water. And under the right conditions, they multiply very rapidly, as often as once every 20 minutes. You probably know that some kinds of bacteria can cause disease. But other kinds are useful, like these nitrogen-fixing bacteria. They're able to take nitrogen from the air and turn it into the nitrogen compounds that are needed by growing plants. Plants like alfalfa or soybeans have these tiny nodules on their roots. And each of the nodules contains thousands of nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Since each bacterium is a single cell without a true nucleus, many scientists believe bacteria should be classified not with the fungi, but with the blue-green algae, which are also single-celled organisms with genetic material that's not organized into a true nucleus. But blue-green algae do have chlorophyll and can make their own food. The green color of the chlorophyll is partially masked by another pigment, usually a blue one. Blue-green algae, like bacteria, multiply by simple cell division. Although all blue-green algae are single-celled organisms, in some types the single cells group together to form threads or filaments that may be large enough to be seen without a microscope. In still water, some types of blue-green algae may cause a condition known as water bloom. And some water blooms may be poisonous to animal life in the water or nearby. So, some types of blue-green algae are poisonous, but other types can be used as food by small water animals. Even though blue-green algae may not be classified as true plants, they do have chlorophyll, and so they're at the beginning of a food chain. And there are other types of single-celled algae that are classified as true plants. That includes the diatoms, or golden algae. Unlike bacteria and blue-green algae, diatom cells do have a nucleus. And of course, they also have chlorophyll, although its color is masked by a yellow pigment. All single-celled algae can reproduce by cell division. But since each of these cells does have a true nucleus, the process is different from cell division in blue-green algae and bacteria. Here's one of several kinds of green algae. It's called spirogyra. Each thin strand is actually a colony of many individual single cells, joined end to end. The chlorophyll in each cell is contained in a ribbon-shaped structure called a chloroplast. Most of the time, Spirogyra reproduces by a process of cell division, but it can also reproduce by a primitive sexual process. Tubes form between opposite strands, each tube connecting two cells. The contents of one cell pass through the tube and merge with the contents of the opposite cell. The result is a special type of cell called a zygote. The zygotes have a hard case and can survive a cold winter or a long dry spell. When conditions are favorable again, a new strand will grow from each zygote. And in early spring, near the shore of a lake or pond, you'll often find clumps of Spirogyra on the surface of the water. The mass of threads has a thin jelly-like coating that makes it slippery. You can see why it's sometimes called pond silk. Spirogyra is one of several types of green algae that you can find in fresh water, a lake or pond. You'll find other types of algae in salt water, in the ocean or on the rocks near shore. This seaweed is one type of brown algae. It has chlorophyll, but the green color is masked by a brown pigment. The largest types of brown algae are called kelps. They have a more complex structure than most other algae, but not as complex as higher plants. The root-like parts of this kelp are really structures called holdfasts that anchor the plant to a rock or to the sea bottom. And it has bladders that help keep it afloat. There are also several types of red algae, often found in very deep water. The pigment that masks the color of its chlorophyll actually helps it gather certain wavelengths of light for use in making food. Seaweeds are the beginning of a food chain. And that food chain may include human beings. Japanese and other Oriental people have used seaweed as food for many years. Also, a substance called algin, produced from seaweed, is used in making ice cream and other kinds of food. And we use algae to make several other products. These are ashes left after a certain type of seaweed is burned. Further processing will yield crystals of iodine. A solution, or tincture of iodine, is used as an antiseptic. And agar, the gelatin-like substance that's used in laboratories to grow bacteria cultures, is manufactured from certain types of red algae. Red and brown algae have a more complex structure than other algae, but they don't have the true leaves, stems, or roots that the more highly developed plants have. That's why all algae are considered to be simple organisms. And fungi, even the largest ones, are also simple organisms. Since fungi have no chlorophyll, they depend for food on other living things, or on living things that have died, like these rotting leaves. Mushrooms reproduce by forming spores. This puffball, one kind of mushroom, has billions of tiny spores, light enough to be carried on the wind. Here's how the spores look under the microscope. Mushrooms and other organisms that cause dead material to decay are called saprophytes, and they're an important part of the chain of life. By causing decay, they help to fertilize the soil and make possible the growth of plants. But other fungi can be harmful. This bracket fungus is a parasite. It draws its food from a living tree, and that causes decay and eventually kills the tree. Some parasitic fungi are much smaller. This is a mold, seen under a microscope. A mold living on a plant can cause disease and eventually kill the plant. And food may be ruined by the growth of mold. A mold consists of a tangled web of threads or filaments called the mycelium. On top are stalks with spore cases. When a spore case breaks open, the spores are released and scattered. If they find a food supply, a new mold will grow. But molds are not always harmful. One type of mold that may grow on bread is called penicillium, and it can be used to make the antibiotic medicine called penicillin. And a penicillium mold is also used in the making of blue cheese. The mold is what causes the dark spots that give the cheese its special flavor. Another type of fungus is used in baking, one of several types of yeast, a single-celled fungus. As the yeast cells multiply, they produce carbon dioxide, and that's what causes bread to rise. So, some yeasts are useful, but yeast may also be parasitic, drawing its food from another living organism and destroying it. Sometimes, though, a fungus may live with another type of organism in a way that benefits both partners. The growth on this rock is called a lichen. It's a partnership between a fungus and an alga. If we take a sample and put it under the microscope, we'll see the round cells of the alga that make food for both partners and the long fungus cells that gather water and anchor the lichen to the rock. There are several different types of lichens and a variety of colors. The partnership between alga and fungus works so well that lichens can flourish in places where no other organism could survive. As it grows, the lichen helps to break down rock to form soil, and that will eventually make it possible for plants to take root and grow. So algae and fungi, whether they form a partnership in a lichen or live separately, are an important part of the chain of life. We have found a number of ways to use them in food, in medicines, and as time goes on, we can expect to find important new ways to benefit from these simple organisms, the algae and fungi.